This is the Nothing Phone 1, and it is honestly one of the most unique phones that I have ever seen. And that's not necessarily just because of its design and, the really cool LED lights on the back, but also in terms of its price. At £400, the Nothing Phone 1 is almost half the price of an iPhone 13. So in this video, we're going to compare it against the iPhone 13, not necessarily to see if it's any better, but more to see how close it actually comes to the iPhone 13. And I want to start off with the overall presentation when you first buy both of these devices. The iPhone comes in this very generic cardboard box with a cable and a manual inside, but then the Nothing Phone's box is so much more unique. And to take the phone out, you have to grab it like this. And same goes for the accessories, you simply slide them out. And it's not just the box that looks unique, it's also the accessories. For example, this is how the SIM eject tool looks and compares to the one that we get with the iPhone. This is the coolest SIM eject tool that I've seen. Same goes with the charger, which you do have to buy separately, by the way, just like with Apple's. It's made out of glossy plastic and then enclosed into this transparent enclosure. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the original iPod and Apple's old design language. In fact, Tony Fadell, the inventor of the iPod, is actually a big investor in Nothing. They even have their own custom font, which they're using on the box and all of their accessories. They're even using this font inside the actual phone. And then I'm also a fan of Nothing's simplicity of the lineup. They have one phone and one pair of earbuds. Android manufacturers have loads of options. Apple has a few. 5 different iPhones and 3 different AirPods. So yeah, I do feel like Nothing has a much better presentation at the moment than Apple does. So what about the design? Well, you have to admit that the Nothing Phone has one of the most unique designs on any phone right now. The back is fully see-through, and you can see the metal panels on the inside, as well as the screws and a couple of other tiny components. But the most unique thing is the glyph interface. Essentially, you have these LED lights that can light up and then sync to your ringtones and your notifications. You can also use the glyph interface for video as a fill light. One of my favorite things about the glyph interface is that it also shows you the charging indicator when your phone is plugged in. Now, I gotta be honest, although I do think that the glyph interface is really, really cool, I don't actually have a use for it myself. Like, I don't really get phone calls, and then in terms of notifications, I would need to have my phone facing down on the table, which has a risk of actually scratching the screen. But still, I cannot deny the fact that it is a very unique phone with its Tron legacy style, whereas the iPhone is definitely a bit more generic. Although the Nothing Phone was actually very inspired by the iPhone and by Apple in general, especially Apple's old era. For example, we've noticed that on the back, they list their address and also the model number, which actually matches the same style that Apple uses on their devices starting with A. Like, you can see how the frame of the phone is almost identical to the one on the iPhone. Same goes for the volume buttons. They're almost an exact copy of what we already have on the iPhone. Although in terms of the overall size, it is actually very similar to an iPhone 13 Pro Max. It's got almost the exact same height, although it is a bit narrower than the 13 Pro Max. Now, I do want to mention the weight here though, because compared to the 13 Pro Max, it is significantly lighter. Compared to the 13, it is a tiny bit heavier, as it is, of course, a larger phone. But overall, it just feels a bit, a bit empty, a bit too light compared to what it should feel like for such a premium looking phone. And I also really like what Nothing did with the front of their phone. So the bezels are exactly the same thickness as on the iPhone 13, and they're also uniform. So we don't have a notch, we have a punch hole camera cutout in the top left. It's not actually in the corner, it's just towards the left-hand side of the device. And I actually do like this, as when I'm watching content, I usually hold my phone like this. So in that case, my hand is covering the cutout, and you kind of get this full screen view in this case. Now, I also want to mention the fact that the Nothing Phone comes in 2 colors, black and white, whereas with the iPhone 13, you can pick between 6 different colors. Although, you don't actually have a pure white or a pure black option. But of course, that we cannot talk about a hardware design without talking about the software design as well. Nothing went for what is essentially a pure stock Android experience with some very small tweaks. Tweaks such as some custom widgets, and then a custom camera and a custom voice recorder app. They both use haptics, and I was quite surprised in terms of the Nothing Phone 1's haptics. They're actually pretty good considering the price. They're almost as good as on the iPhone. So I think overall, when it comes to the design, you gotta ask yourselves, do you prefer a more traditional design like the iPhone is, or do you prefer something that stands out a bit more? But I think in a good way. So what about the actual displays? Well, one of the biggest differences between the two is of course the size. So on the iPhone 13, we have a 6.1 inch panel compared to the 6.55 inch panel on the Nothing Phone 1. Now, I gotta say, I do actually prefer the display size on the iPhone 13. It's just much more usable in one hand, and I don't know, I feel like the Nothing Phone is actually quite big, a bit too big for my preference. I do hope that with the next Nothing Phone, maybe the Nothing Phone 2, they will release a couple of more size options. Aside from the size, another big display difference is the refresh rate. So the iPhone has the standard, 60 Hz refresh rate panel, whereas Nothing has 120 Hz, which I was actually not expecting to see. I was expecting something like 90 Hz. But I gotta say, just using the two, the Nothing Phone feels far more fluid and actually faster to use than the iPhone, despite it having a much weaker processor. Something else that I also really love about the Nothing Phone is that we do have an always-on display, which is something that is rumored to come to the iPhone 14 Pros, but we already have it on the Nothing Phone 1. And it's also a very simple always-on display. It's very similar to Google's approach, but of course with the Nothing font. I also love how we do have single tap to wake on the Nothing Phone, just like on the iPhone. And then of course, we also have raise to wake, once again, just like on the iPhone. The Pixel does have this already, by the way, but a lot of Android phones do not. Now, in terms of the display quality overall, I gotta say, these are both very, very good panels. Very similar in terms of the color reproduction. The iPhone is a bit more vibrant, but other than that, they are indeed very, very similar. The brightness is a bit higher on the iPhone, which I did notice when using these outdoors. The iPhone was much easier to see. But aside from that, you would honestly be really happy with the Nothing Phone's display. Now, since we are talking about a display, I have to mention the fingerprint reader, which is built into the display, and it's an optical one on the Nothing Phone compared to Face ID on the iPhone. Now, although I do prefer Face ID in general, just because you can unlock your iPhone even if it's sitting flat on a table, the Nothing Phone's finger reader is really, really fast. I think my only complaint with it is that it's a bit too low in terms of its positioning, but maybe that was something that Nothing did because of the design, I guess. By this I mean that it is essentially aligned with the home controls. So what about the cameras? The camera is usually what makes the difference between a mid-range phone and the flagship. And I have to say the camera is okay on the Nothing Phone. In some cases, it is better than on the iPhone actually, but in most cases it is just average. So the iPhone has two 12 megapixel sensors, a wide and an ultra wide. The Nothing has two 50 megapixel sensors, also wide and an ultra wide. In daytime shots, in some cases, it did better than the iPhone, like in this shot right here, as the Nothing Phone's shot was brighter and sharper. But then in other cases, it really missed it, and it just looked like a total potato. The ultra wide was okay. The iPhone is sharper and with less distortion. In terms of the portrait mode, I was actually surprised, as it was better on the Nothing Phone, with better edge detection and also a much sharper image overall. The front-facing camera is surprisingly also better on the Nothing Phone. It's wider angle, it was sharper, and the colors also looked better than on the iPhone. And I was also surprised to see that we actually have a macro mode on the Nothing Phone, which the iPhone of course doesn't have. You need to go to the Pro models to get that. So you can indeed get much closer to the subject that you can on the iPhone, although if you punch in the iPhone's image digitally, well, the difference between the two isn't as massive. In terms of nighttime photography, I was actually quite surprised, as the Nothing was able to produce a brighter and a sharper image than the iPhone, especially when using the ultra-wide module. The difference was night and day. The Nothing Phone was significantly better than the iPhone here. And then the difference was also night and day when it came to video, but this time in favor of the iPhone. The iPhone was just miles better here, with brighter shadows, a more vivid image, and just, I don't know, it just looked significantly better. Not even to mention that the Nothing Phone is stuck to 4K 30, it can't do 4K 60, and it also flickered a lot for some reason. Hopefully this gets fixed with a future software update. So having said all of this, is it worth getting a Nothing Phone instead of something like an iPhone 13? And to be honest, absolutely. Like, the fact that you can buy almost two Nothing Phones for the price of one iPhone 13, I think that says everything. And for the most part, it delivers on everything that the iPhone already does. And even more in cases like, the display's refresh rates, or the glyph system, or, the unboxing experience and everything else. Yes, you do sacrifice on the camera quite a bit. And then you also sacrifice on the speakers, which is really my number one complaint with this phone. Just listen to this. So yeah, the iPhone is just way clearer and also louder, but something weird that I've also noticed is that even though the Nothing Phone 1 does have stereo speakers, most of the sound is only coming from the bottom speakers, so the earpiece is just very, very quiet. So I don't know if this is a hardware issue, if this is how the phone was designed, or if this is more of like a balancing issue, and in that case, it will be solvable through a software update. But other than that, I think that this is honestly such an amazing product, especially at this price point. Even if you're an iPhone user, I think this is a great option for you, especially if you have an older iPhone. Keep in mind that the iPhone SE3 costs £420, so this is more expensive than the Nothing Phone 1, and to be honest, it doesn't even compare. But let me know, what do you guys think of Nothing in general? Not just the phone, but also the company and their whole vision. I'm Daniel, this is ZONEofTECH, and stay tuned for maybe some more Nothing videos. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.